AT&T will delay deployment 5G near some U.S. airports planned for this week. The decision comes after the nation's largest airlines warned the rollout could interfere with aircraft technology and cause massive flight disruptions.
So the airlines have asked that the new faster mobile service be banned within 2 miles of airport runways. This showdown between the two industries threatens to further disrupt the airline pandemic recovery. So for more now, we want to bring in someone who has to deal with this on the front lines. He is Dennis Tajer. He is the spokesman for the Allied Pilot Association, which represents 15,000 professional pilots who fly for American Airlines. Dennis is also a pilot himself. Dennis, welcome to Quicktake, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm going to start with a really basic question. Why is 5G service bad for airplanes and pilots?
Well, it's not bad for airplanes and pilots unless it's pointed at us and we're bombarded by the signal and there's no precautions taken. And that's what's happened here, is that a commercial interest, and granted they did the deal years ago and spent $80+ billion. They're complaining about the FAA not getting at it quick enough. The bottom line is the FAA is standing up, sending out notices, very ominous and clear-worded notices about the effects of 5G on our aircraft. And it's not just about low weather approaches. The altimeter, the radio altimeter, can receive a signal, and then when it gets corrupted information, it sends it to up to 17 different systems on the airplane, like flight controls, throttles, thrust reversers, engine anti-ice. The list goes on from the FAA. And even the FAA says that these bad readings, the pilot may not capture them in time to maintain safe flight and landing. That's their words, to maintain safe flight and landing. So this is a clear safety issue. Reliability is second. It's important to us as a business, but this is why we're up against this commercially derived deadline. But there's no deadlines when it comes to safety. So we're going to continue to stand with the FAA and the airlines and the manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, to say, let's get this done right.
Well, Dennis, help me understand. I hear you talking about the control systems that it could mess up, but as a non-pilot speaker, I'm not super sure I understand how bad this could potentially be. I hear you saying that landing could be an issue. I mean, is this a legitimate safety concern for passengers beyond just sort of a flight scheduling mishap type of thing?
Absolutely. The reliability is important to us, and we would be standing right with our company if that was jeopardized. But the safety feature on this, if an airline, to give you an example, a 777, a 777, heavy, large airplane coming in, if the radio altimeter sends bad information that it's close to the ground when it really isn't, those auto throttles come back to idle. Now, it takes time for those engines to spool back up, and a pilot has to capture that. So this is one distraction that can cause an airplane to sink right into the ground while the engines are spooling back up. So that's one example. There are a myriad of them. Yeah. This is one instrument that feeds critical information to all of these flight critical systems. So it's not unlike the MAX, different system, but where one bad bit of information caused a cascading effect, a tsunami of other things to happen. And we don't need that. We can get through this, but we have to test it and we have to do it responsibly. That's what our passengers not only deserve, but morally should have. And that's what we're going to do. As captain of the 737, I'm not going until I'm certain it's safe. And I know I've got the FAA and my airline standing right behind me.
I just want to point out that we've been dealing with this for a couple of weeks now, and AT&T has now says that it has voluntarily agreed to temporarily defer turning on a limited number of towers around certain airport runways. And that is, of course, as AT&T and Verizon continue to work with the aviation industry and the FAA to provide further information about 5G deployment overall. One thing that I don't quite understand is we knew that 5G rollout was coming for a while now. It's not a huge surprise. How did we get to this point where it became a dire matter in the final couple of weeks? Why wasn't this resolved or addressed, I don't know, last spring, last summer?
That's a great point. And you really, I saw the complaint of AT&T. We're a labor union. We know how negotiations go. We don't negotiate on safety. But what you're doing is you're going in far and you say, well, how about if I just take a little bit more and then we're okay, right? This is actually, AT&T complaining about the FAA is exposing their lack of follow through on this. Now, I don't run their company. I'm not an investor in it, but How could you have spent $80 billion and not gone through a fulsome run through on what this would take to actually deploy? That's their failing. Now, granted, I know they're upset with the FAA, but guess what? The FAA has stepped up. They have clearly communicated this, and they're like pilots. They're like, I don't care about the drama. It's about keeping people safe. So this one, falls in a couple of places, but the bottom line is we are where we are today, and those airplanes shouldn't be flying unless there's a delay in this or an accommodation that everyone agrees is the right path for this. We can get this done, but just jamming this through and creating these fake deadlines, we know the drama that I'll stop there. But the bottom line is this is a business interest, and we have a human interest as pilots, and that's keeping people safe. You don't want to stand at the podium with me and my airline and the FAA explaining why your signal caused an aircraft incident to happen. And that's dealing with it at the lightest level, let alone the human tragedy that could happen. And we're not here to scare you, but we're here to tell you how important this is. Otherwise, you wouldn't see all these safety stakeholders talking like I am as a pilot union. And the airlines and the manufacturers and the FAA. It's a rare moment that you have all of these folks saying the same thing. And we should be proud of that because safety is the number one priority, and we're proving that today.
Well, sticking with safety, I mean, how do you get this accomplished safely? I know that in a letter to the White House, 10 major airlines requested that this not be used within 2 miles of airports. What could this rollout potentially look like in a way that does keep pilots and passengers safe?
Well, we're pointing to the right direction. Let's not forget that not too long ago, it was just, hey, we're rolling it out, we're flipping the switch. Now we're talking about buffers. The FAA put out a great information stream about the cell phone company said, oh, we've done this in other countries. Yeah, but you did it differently. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to rocks. In France, they tilt the antenna down. It's much less powerful. It's degraded. It's not in the same frequency band. It's right up against the one that my aircraft uses. And they provided a lot more fulsome protection. In the US, they were going to do none of that. So we're getting there. It's unfortunate that we have to go through this duress, this drama to get there. But this one I'm going to lay on the folks that purchased and the folks that sold it to them. But that's all that's rear view mirror stuff. And the airplane doesn't have a rear view mirror. We just look out the front windscreen, and what we see is an issue, and it's got to be resolved, and we will get it resolved. The commercial interests will be addressed, and so will safety. They will coexist. They will not be separate.
Let me ask about how this is working in other countries. Clearly, the United States is not the only country that's dealing with 5G airwaves. How's Europe? How's Asia dealing with this? Do they have a better solution?
Well, clearly the example the FAA puts out is that Europe, in France, the antenna is actually pointed down. They have about over a minute and a half of protected zone. What is being proposed by the cell phone companies is we'll give you about 20 seconds of protection. They depowered it, so it's not as strong as it was being proposed to be put out in the US. The signal strength, the frequency is now buffered in France away from the equipment. So they've done a myriad of things that the French believe was the way to get it done and do it safely. Now, that's not to say, just because the French do it doesn't mean we need to do it that way. We have a risk management plan. We commend them for taking theirs on and executing, but we in the US are going to measure this on our risk management. In the US, why we're so safe in the aviation business is not because we wait for an accident to happen and look how to prevent it. We look for it before it happens. That's called risk management. And we have amazing professionals that analyze this along with the engineers, and that's what keeps people alive. And we're going to continue to move on that philosophy because it's worked.
Well, full disclosure, I am guilty of not turning my phone off necessarily when we take off. I'm sorry about that, pilot Dennis. But is that the same problem? Is that the same service issue? Or is that different than what we're talking about here in terms of the severity?
That's a great point. And that's called being a human being. I've been there too. I've been in the back, and how embarrassing when I'm deadheading and my phone starts to ring when it shouldn't.
Oh, so glad we're not the only ones.
Yeah, you're not. But see, that's not the issue in this. It's the cell phones can create an issue, but that's not the solution. Let's collect all the cell phones and turn them off It's the signal that's bombarding the aircraft while it's up there in the sky. That's what's affecting this radio altimeter that cascades into all these other systems. So I'm certain the experts would tell you, well, having the cell phone on can exacerbate that. But the core issue is that the storm is out there. The cell phone companies are creating a storm that covers the entire United States with this proposal. We're trying to help them make it rain for their customers, but not create a thunderstorm in the path of the airplane I'm flying.
Is this an AT&T specific problem, or is this an AT&T and Verizon problem, or is this a U.S. telecom operators problem? I'm just trying to understand who's the bad actor here, or maybe bad actor is the wrong word. Who's the party that needs to be making adjustments?
Well, it's clear that AT&T and Verizon are the parties that bought the signal, as I understand it. So, villain, well, I'm going to say, coming into this, you were a commercial enterprise, spent a lot of money on a great product that we all want to have. We want you to be successful because that generates business air travel. So we live together. Mm-hmm. But how you're conducting yourselves right now, you have created yourself, you've dressed yourself as the villain in this. It's okay. You can take off the black cape and join us and get this done safely. And we will laud your product, and we will laud the safety margin, and we'll welcome you into this safety culture. You're an outlier right now. It's not a good space to be in. I'm an AT&T, probably 20 years. I want you to be successful. I like your product, and I want Verizon to be equally as pleased. But we've got to protect people. You know, you're interested in a quick download of videos and other services that 5G can bring. I'm interested in a safe download of passengers to each airport that I land at.
Right. And again, Verizon and AT&T said today that they would delay the debut of new 5G cellular service near some airports. Final question for you, Dennis. Should people plan to not travel if and when this does eventually go through? Should they stop flying?
Well, number one, for their response of they're going to not do it in some airports, it'd be like me coming on the airplane and saying, hey, some of our flights are going to be unimpeded and some aren't. Not a very comforting thing. So we're going to get to a better place. Passengers should be really as much drama as in its intention and seriousness. No, seeing all of us out here, the pilot unions, the airlines, the FAA, the manufacturers, we're on your side, and we're a formidable force. We're a tall wall, so we've got your back, and our airlines are not going to let these airplanes fly unless they're safe, and I know that I'm not going to fly unless I feel it's safe. So if the airplane is there, you're going to be okay, and right now we're fighting for you, and we're not going to stop, and there are more of us than there are of them, and it's not an us and them. We can make it all of us together, but we know how to put the gloves on, and when it comes to protecting our passengers, we get real passionate about it because it's everything to us.
All right. Well, really appreciate you joining us and giving us that context, Dennis. That was Allied Pilots Association spokesman Dennis Tajer joining us on the latest with this 5G service.